Most people think that change happens the moment you decide to be different. But deciding to change and actually changing are not the same thing. The real growth happens in the space between intention and response, or intention and action. In a fraction of a second, most people don't even notice. If you're new here, I am Chris O, the host of PS Younger Self, and this is part 11 of the Living by Your Standards series. And that moment I'm referring to is this micro moment pause. The moment where the old version of you shows up automatically and you either follow her or you choose differently. So stick around. In this episode, I will explain what I mean by that micro moment. But first, I want to explain why just knowing your standards and saying you live by them isn't enough, and why we struggle sometimes to live by what we say are our standards. And if you've been here since the beginning of the series, since January, first of all, thank you. Thank you so much for coming back always. And also, more importantly, thank you for investing in yourself. You likely already then have done the foundational work. You understand the difference between expectations and standards, which are two very distinctly different concepts, but often conflated, and where a lot of the frustration lives. You've identified your standards and you started to raise them, uphold them because of your intention you set to live by them. And yet you might still find yourself thinking, I know my standards, but why do I slip back into old patterns? Why do I still respond in ways that don't match who I say I am becoming? I know this question very, very intimately because I've lived it. Sometimes I still live it because I am not perfect. By any means, I am not sitting here sharing this because I have now done all the work and now I'm perfect. No, I am sharing this from lived experience, but also what is working in practice is still showing up. And this is often the moment when we turn inward and start blaming ourselves. We assume it means that we're not disciplined enough, we're not healed enough, we're not evolved enough, we're not doing better, we're not enough. I want you to stop that self-blame right now. Stop. Because that interpretation is not only unfair, but it is psychologically inaccurate and deeply, deeply disempowering. And I will explain why. And that explanation of why will be, I think, a huge light bulb moment, because it certainly was for me. See, knowing our standards lives in our cognition, but responding in the moment, these micro moments, it happens faster than our conscious thought. That's why you can genuinely say, I know better, after the fact, and still be pulled into an old response or pattern. Not because you failed, but because awareness, simply because awareness hasn't met that moment yet. It hasn't had a chance. As I shared in the previous episode, our nervous system defaults to what feels familiar, even when it no longer aligns, because our nervous system equates familiarity to safety, even if it's not. And if you understand that, the disconnect stops feeling personal, and you understand why, from a physiological perspective, why your body is operating, wants to operate one way. But I want to add another layer here that really changed everything for me in understanding how our body wants to operate in these micro moments. See, psychologist and Nobel Prize winning author Daniel Kahneman, who wrote the best-selling book Thinking Fast and Slow, based on his renowned, groundbreaking research on human decision-making, how we make decisions. And he explains that our thinking operates through two systems. There is system one, that is the fast, automatic, unconscious way of thinking. It handles immediate interpretations, immediate responses. It runs on habit, on pattern, and efficiency. This is where old patterns live. And this is where automatic reactions live. And then there's system 2 way of thinking, which is slower, which is more deliberate, which is conscious. This is where our self-awareness lives, in our system 2 way of thinking. This is where our reasoning lives. This is where our understanding of standards and values exists. This is where our reflection lives, because all of that requires conscious, deliberate self-awareness. And most of us will understand our standards through system 2, because we have to, again, have the conscious, deliberate, intentional way of identifying what they are and to set them. But when something activates you, like a text from someone, a tone of voice of someone, something you saw on social media, or a delay, or emotional uncertainty or stress, you name it, your brain doesn't pause and wait for system 2 to kick in. No, it will automatically default to system 1, because remember, it is the default mode of operating, because it's the efficient way of thinking. But that doesn't mean it's right or wrong. Simply means it's being efficient. System 1 is designed to act quickly, especially when the body is activated. And this is why insight alone cannot change behavior. Just knowing something, having the insight will not change a behavior, and why we will often catch ourselves saying, I know better. This was a huge light bulb moment, understanding why and how my body is set up to operate from a physiological nervous system standpoint, and where familiarity often registers safety. And then our way of thinking will default to system 1 because it's automatic, because it's being efficient. You begin to see what's really happening, the way our body wants to lead in those moments of activation to keep you safe, what it thinks is safe, and to be efficient. So when you say, I know better, why did I still respond that way? You could now say, it's because you understand that the response happened automatically before even the awareness had a chance to enter that micro moment. And once I understood this, it shifted everything. Everything. Again, like this big light bulb moment, as if like the clouds just like clear the sky, and I just had this aha moment. It all made sense. And now I want to speak about that micro moment. And I developed a framework in that micro moment where you can be aware to lead by a very specific choice. And what I call the micro moment isn't just a pause. It's actually a moment of recognition. It's the moment where you become aware that more than one version of you is available to respond. For me, it shows up like a split-second movie scene right in front of my eyes. I don't know how it happened, but it happened like a split-second movie scene right in front of my eyes. And that movie scene consisted of 2 versions of me. One side, the older version of me, the version whose nervous system learned to feel secure through reassurance, explanation, seeking clarity, constantly, immediacy, and validation. Not because the old version of me was weak, but simply because it is what it learned to keep her safe. And the other side of me in that split-second movie was the version living by the standards I set for myself, And it's wild how I didn't just theorize this framework of micro moment, but it happened to me several times in this past year of doing this work, where in that split second, I saw a split second scene, a movie scene of two versions of myself. And in that moment, it is not about just being in between stimulus and response, because yes, it is, and then choosing a better response. But it's actually about that micro moment is more about being between identity and behavior. It's a split second identity fork that comes right in front of you to decide which part of your identity you're going to lead with. And in that moment, I didn't force myself to act differently. I didn't override an emotion because that would be suppressing it. I didn't talk myself out of how I feel. I simply observed two versions of myself in front of me. And then I chose not just a better behavior, not just a better response, but I chose into the identity I now recognize as mine, who lives by the standards she sets for herself. The woman who I am becoming, the woman who I say I am becoming, the woman my standards belong to. And this is how standards stops being conceptual and starts becoming embodied, and why the series is called Living by Your Standards. So how can you apply this micro moment framework? How do you actually work this into your life? Let me explain. This isn't something you need to force. It's not about being perfect at all. At all. Because that micro moment is not about control. It's about relationship, and not about the relationship with somebody else. It's about the relationship you're learning to relate to the activation. At first, you might only notice the micro moment after you have responded, which is actually totally fine and actually a great place to start it. And it counts. It's actually that awareness after the fact, because awareness always comes before change. And over time, that awareness moves closer and closer to the moment itself. And eventually you start noticing that split second identity fork as it's happening. And maybe it'll happen for you like a split second movie screen of two versions of yourself right in front of your eyes. That's when choice becomes available. And it's not just any choice. It's not a choice to do better. It is not what I should do. It is not what is the better response right now. It's not that at all. Instead, it is, which version of me am I choosing to lead right now? And that is the shift, the identity-led shift, identity leadership, from optimizing behavior to leading from identity, choosing which identity you are leading from. And this is how self-trust is built, through small, repeated, conscious moments of alignment, chosen intentionally, deliberately, again, consciously. These micro moments happen constantly. There will be countless, maybe even thousands, tens of thousands a day. And you will not catch them all. That is not the point, because you don't need to. Again, it is not about perfection. And it's not about optimizing, again, for behaviors in every one of those micro moments of our day. But the intention to notice is what changes who leads. Over time, the version of you who lives by her standards starts to show up more and more. And eventually, she doesn't just respond, certainly not react. She leads. So here's what I want you to walk away with from this episode number 11 of the Living by Your Standards series. Living by your standards isn't about knowing better. Again, it's not about perfection at all. It's about deciding who leads in the moments that matter most. In those transformative moments, because real growth doesn't happen when you make a decision in your head. It happens in those split seconds when the old version of you shows up automatically, and then you recognize the other version of you are now becoming, and it is now also available. The woman you are becoming doesn't eliminate old patterns, doesn't just squash them. At least I will speak for myself. They still exist. I can, in moments, still default to them. But the newer version who's more aware notices them sooner. And then she pauses. And then she observes. And then she chooses in that split second micro moment right in front of her from which identity she wants to lead with, and not by impulse. And if this episode resonated with you, first of all, thank you. Thank you. Please let me know what resonated the most with you. And if you've been here from the beginning, thank you. I would love to hear what you're working on, what practices you're putting into place, because this is a constant practice. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your investment in yourself, for your investment in showing up here, because the real growth happens, again, in the space between intention and response. In a fraction of a second, most people don't even notice. Oh, and by the way, if this episode was valuable to you, stick around and watch this next episode I want to link to here, which speaks to the 3 shifts that start to happen when you start to raise your standards. Because as you start to shift into this new identity, there are going to be a lot of uncomfortable shifts that happen. And this episode will help you recognize them and understand them, that it is part of the natural course of raising and upholding those standards, and to not look at it as something negative happening, or that living by your standards is not working for you. So I'll link to that here. And thank you again. Thank you so much. And I applaud you for living by your intention to live by your standards. And I hope to see you again next time.